with like okay. Nice. Still. Good evening. With a slight delay, we actually start our first discussion tonight on the future of European documentaries. With me are 4 wonderful people. We should be actually 5 people, but you know, in these very difficult times, it happens that someone gets ill and can't join because Corona makes it impossible, because she should have been actually with me in the studio and not online. That's the reason. So unfortunately, Zeynep can't join us tonight, but I do have with me Rada, who joins us from the Netherlands. She's a critic, a filmmaker, a programmer, so she has the whole perspective on the documentary scene. From my perspective, next to her is Jan, who is a producer and founded a very successful world sales company that deals with documentaries. Then we have Nils, who is a commissioning editor and for Netflix and a producer himself. We will actually talk about a film that he produced in the second discussion we had today. We are going to have today the Bormio case. And then we have Daniel from the Medienboard Berlin-Brandenburg, which is for our region here the most important funder. So welcome. So nice to have you all here. I will directly dive in with the question. The topic is very large today. We are talking about the future of European documentaries. So first of all, if you hear that title, what is your first quick thought on it? I will start with Rada and then go around.
Wow, I would say that in spite of all problems and you know, complaints and looking with a critical eye where the documentaries go, less money and so on, I still believe the future is bright because we have more stories. And what is important for a good documentary, it's a strong story, important topic for the whole world. For all cultures, and there are more and more stories like this. So I think there is a lot to share, and still there is a heart and passion in documentaries. And I can see as a programmer that people are really interested to watch documentaries. When you go to the festival and when you bring film to people, people really stay in cinema and they want to talk and they want to discuss what is in the film and further what film brings to the topic, to the table to be discussed.
Really nice. Thank you for that answer first. And in my head immediately was good that Jan sits next to you, because he probably can give us the perspective from a world sales point of view. You said, like, there is an audience, we can bring through documentaries different views into the world. Jan, how is it? Is it because I read actually yesterday from Selma from Outlook that it's harder and harder to create a buzz during a festival for a documentary, and that it gets harder and harder to like really push it out in the open. Give us
one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Now you're here.
One more general observation. Of documentary, there's production and distribution. I think that production-wise, we've been hearing stories about there's going to be less films because of the crisis. I don't think we see that this year. I hear from film festivals that they still have enormous amounts of submissions, but maybe in production next year, a number of films will be delayed or not being done, and that will maybe cause a problem. Distribution-wise, there's a lot of problems. there's a lot of problems by the festivals going online, and that creates all kinds of logistical issues and attention issues. And we'll get to that a little bit later.
So I will continue to Nils. From your perspective, I mean, you work for one of the biggest platforms there is, with a huge documentary section, actually. How do you see the European documentaries in particular within that platform?
Within the platform, I think there's two point of views. You know, in general, the market isn't changed, I think, for producers and filmmakers, but that is an opportunity, I feel. And, you know, we at Netflix are extremely excited about documentaries, and they're equally judged as fiction. And I see the same with all the competitors, HBO, Amazon, Sky, and name it. There is a huge demand for new content, and as I said, they're equally judged, and documentaries are getting more entertaining and are being watched by a younger audience as well now, which is great. And I think it's a challenge at the moment that the market is in change, but it's also a lot of opportunities for filmmakers.
And now, Dani, from a funder's perspective, I know we did have the conversation before. Berlin, the Medienboard is not the biggest documentary funder there is. But they do. What do you see? Do you think there is enough good content coming? Do you think we need to change an approach here? What is your feeling of documentaries in the future?
Well, thank you for inviting us and for us to be here and have this opportunity to exchange. I do think it's a difficult climate at the moment, but there will be more, and there is a future for documentary, surely. There's some challenges on how they're financed. Not so much that the willingness for the money is no longer there. That's not the case, and it helps that there is so much demand at the moment, because a lot of fiction projects are much harder to realize at the moment than documentary products. So there's a huge interest at the moment. At least that's what we hear from producers. No, but the traditional models, how the financing is run, is changing because of the streamization of content. So there'll be some changes, and that's a challenge to ride. But that's the industry as a whole. That's not particularly a default or a problem. That's just a documentary problem. Yeah.
If we talk about the industry as a whole, we just had the Human Rights Film Festival Berlin a few weeks ago, and we are currently actually doing solidarity action for cinemas, for our cinemas that we worked with in Berlin. We are showing films again online, and all the revenues go to the cinemas. But what I've seen is that actually I can reach more people if I do a hybrid festival, and that for me, particularly with the documentaries that we show that in our case are even more specific on human rights, it gives me the opportunity to show it to people who wouldn't see them otherwise, most likely, either in really small cities or because they probably wouldn't make it to a big VOD platform. So with this development over the last few months, what do you think will stick from it? What have we learned for documentaries in particular, and where do you think are also pitfalls that we should not overlook in our enthusiasm that there's some change in there? I will start with Jan this time, because in our pre-talk we had a rather long conversation about this, and I thought that was interesting. Jan?
To create buzz for them and create reputation for them. Now, the festivals don't happen live. They go online, and they've discovered, indeed, what you said, Anna, that there's a totally different way of working out there. I had an experience with a festival that booked a film through us, and they asked if I wanted a screening fee, a flat screening fee, or if I wanted like a participation in the fees of the online. And it was like massively different. I decided to go for the online participation, and it was like 10 times more money. So I think that this hybrid form will continue, Festivals would love to go back live because there's atmosphere and there's things happening in the corridors and the bars and the restaurants, etc., etc. But I think that the reach, most of the festivals will continue to do online because the reach is extraordinary. They can go into the entire country and they can actually, in that sense, stimulate enormously documentary watching, which is very good, and which is really important, create a monetizing model for the filmmakers. I mean, if you know, we all know that the traditional broadcast world is a little bit buying less and less and less. The theatrical is also not doing very well in these days. God knows how long this all will last. But the online possibilities are fantastic. So I really applaud that positive element of the situation for film festivals.
If you look, I mean, you show a film also there to sell it later or to find a buyer. So if you give unlimited views to a festival, is that not also difficult at the same time?
If you, as a sales agent, if I may, if you as a sales agent think there are other media to be sold for real money, then of course you have to take different decisions. You can limit the possibilities of a film festival, but you know what? Many films that go to film festivals go nowhere afterwards. They play at the festival, they go back to their country, and they're disappearing. So I think that that large portion of documentaries has now an extraordinary opportunity.
I would like, Nils, you have been a producer for a very long time and you had a very successful documentary production company. From your point of view as a producer, how do you see the possibilities of hybrid festivals, of VOD, and do you think that a pure cinema release is necessary, or could there also be, for documentaries, hybrid forms of releases?
I don't think there's a general answer, to be honest. I think it really comes down to the project and to the target market that you're aiming for. The whole channels of distribution are really up in the air at the moment, I feel, and in a good way. There are new opportunities and new ways of trying to get the film be seen. And obviously, it's also a calculation as a filmmaker and as a producer that you have to make, you know, like which territories can you sell, which territories have which kind of value. And on the other side, you know, do you want your film to be seen, yes or no? You know, if it's just ending in the closet, you know, nobody wants that, I guess. And I totally agree with Jan, you know, like it is a huge chance to get the film be seen and also get visible as a filmmaker, which is great and can open other doors. So I think it really comes down to be realistic about what you have and what you are able to achieve with that kind of film that you are looking for, that you have and that you want to distribute.
I would continue with Daniel because what I've seen is that there are some rather classical funding forms, so that if you get funding from some institutions, you have to go to the cinema first and then do other ways. Do you think that that model needs to be, or are there already discussions going on that this needs to be changed? Also, I mean, at the moment, you just can't bring a film to the theaters.
Yeah, that's one of the backbones of European film funding, and that is a European project, and that's European legislation, and a lot of times, and part of it is to strengthen producers' IP, creating European content that's different from US content. That's one of the ideas, and the commitment to cinema. So these films should be visible in cinema. And obviously, at the moment, cinemas are more or less closed, and there's, you know, we don't really know the scenario when they can reopen and what's the, you know, there's the economic argument, but there's also the argument that a lot of people have gotten used to them not being there to a certain extent. So we really don't know what's going to happen there, and that will bring some challenges to how we can traditionally fund, because if you come to us and wanting money, then we will ask for a letter of interest in terms of theatrical release in Germany. And that's the tradition, and traditions change, so we don't know. I wouldn't want to make predictions, but obviously we will have to adapt, and we would not do that by telling people what to do, but we have already for the last years been encouraging producers to come to us and explain their strategy to distribute film. And it's interesting that we're talking about festivals, because festivals at the moment are becoming streamers and part-time streamers. And I did hear a lot of cinemas being and distributors, theatrical release distributors in Germany, being we're not that happy. I mean, happy for the promotion, but they don't benefit to the extent. And the exclusivity is still a big argument. And I was wondering how Jan, how your experiences are there, because I do see from what you said earlier is that you're happy to go into festivals and take the money, but there's obviously also the risk that it destroys certain other markets or other benefits.
I know, but that's why I said earlier, it's almost a case-by-case situation. If you expect with your experience that the film has another possibility, or another media possibility, then you hold up and you limit it. But many films won't have that. They will just not get that exposure. So let them go out and let the festivals become VOD platforms in their territory around their themes. It can be ecological, it can be human rights, it can be arts films. I think that is a wonderful development.
Sorry, Anna, that's also something I want to add, is that there's a lot of investment by film funds in Germany into a documentary. But if we look at the tickets sold in the cinemas, it's kind of a lot of time it's underwhelming to be, to use that term. And so there will be changes there at some point needed in order to argue for there to be funding for documentaries. So we're very keen on them having reach.
I think the discussion that we are going to have after this one is really interesting on it, because it's on how to develop that audience and how to bring people for documentaries in the cinemas. But what I've seen in my research, it's also quite different from country to country. So I'm from Austria, and in Austria actually documentaries also in cinemas work rather well. I think that's also about what the audience is used to, but rather from when we had our pre-talks, I thought that two perspectives were very interesting. First of all, of course, I would love to hear what you think about our whole discussion from the point as a festival programmer. But the second point is we did talk quite a lot about VOD, and I think you had some really interesting thoughts on that as well.
When I talk about this topic, I have to think of the place where I'm coming from, Eastern Europe, and comparing to the place where I live now, that's in the Netherlands, in West Europe. So the practice is different, the inputs are different, and the way how documentaries travel is also different. For example, in Eastern Europe, what Jan was talking just a while ago, about how to make it, VODs being place that bring every film to the audience that they want to watch. That actually happened with the festivals in the Balkans, where cinemas closed and the cinemas were devastated and never reopened, never renewed. So festivals were mushrooming, and every almost small town had a festival, and that's how actually a lot of films lived. They went from one to the other and people watched them, and then later maybe they went to some nice documentary platform, like we have one in Prague of IDF and the Documentary Alliance as well, where people can later on watch older films that still are remembered. But what I would be concerned about is that a lot of films are made and a lot of films are forgotten very easily but how to make them be remembered later on. There must be some way to have some, European docu-bank that would be more accessible for everybody and for the research. I was also thinking when we talk about streaming platforms and watching now during COVID time all films during the festivals online, who is the audience? Because we actually don't have statistics. We just have a very flashy numbers, how many people clicked, but we don't know whether they watched the film 5 minutes or 10 or the full film. So and what is the age and the way how people know about. So I think it's a lot undiscovered, unknown. It's a big enigma actually how things work at the moment, because what I see is big numbers of all festivals that everybody is super positive with the response of the audience, getting films by streaming platforms, but I think only later on we can understand how things work.
I did so. Nils nodding quite a lot. No, Jan wants to add something.
Rada, I think this is really the next big step. Now we have done for a year this online stuff, and now it's looking at what it all meant. How, that whole thing about statistics. I think that people have to start to make very serious notes during these procedures. So we learn from this. I agree with you. Sorry for the
No, perfect. That's what we want, an open discussion. A more general question from my side, and I'm wondering if anyone feels like answering it, but do you also think that the numbers will change or the attitude will change in the moment that we are not in lockdowns anymore, that we can go out into the cinemas, participate in live events again, that the streaming numbers will be going like down also for festivals and other initiatives that just started? Or do you think that's a general development? Any? Nils?
I definitely think they will. Yeah, I think they will drop, and obviously we have the same situation for Netflix as well. Everyone is watching right now because they are bored, but I don't think they will drop that immense, and there will be a new kind of opportunity, new habit in exploring film festivals, also online hybrid. And I think that that's a great opportunity. And as Jan said in the beginning, there's new ways of exploring content. And I think it's also a matter of generation in a lot of countries. That's what we experience. And I think it will grow. I definitely think it will grow. And people will watch online content a lot more, and it's fantastic if you think about it. You can just by one click you can see a film from Korea or from where else in the world, and there is complete new democracy in that regard. Before that, you just clicked on TV and you had German content, or in our situation, German-French content on Arte. And that were the documentaries you were able to watch. Now you have variety, and the variety is extremely interesting, I think. And we will all see how that develops in the future. I think we just started.
If I would be a festival in a year, why should I roll back? Why should I not go? Do a hybrid and we've I don't know, in our office we didn't used to do a lot of home office. Now we're permanently in home. So the whole Corona thing has been a huge accelerator for digital competence for a lot of people, and it's changed structures so much. I don't think it's going to roll back. I think people will be very happy to go back to the cinema, but I don't think there will be the same frequency. I don't think we go back to how it was before. So the big challenge is how can the cinemas digitize and be streamers also for their local places. Everybody will try to get into that streaming competence, and I think it'll be very interesting what business models are gonna evolve from that, and how we as a funder can link in there. I think I don't have the answers, but I would be surprised if there is a rollback.
Going to give Rada wants to add something on it.
Yeah, I just want to say additionally, that it would be silly if we wouldn't learn and put this new knowledge in the new practice in the future. That I also predict, and that it's actually very smart. And festivals are already thinking, even if we go on site, we will still keep this part online because it's handy, it's practical, it's better or more inclusive and so on. But I have totally different concern. I think that the new way of watching films will bring new way of cinema aesthetics, because watching on a small screen or on a big screen in these circumstances and that circumstances is very different, and then the filmmakers will think about that while making films, or should think about it. So content-wise, the narrative line is different, the way how you tell this narrative is different, and the cinematic aspect also of making film is different. So that's totally new chapter that is extremely important. It's being imposed on the filmmakers if we say that documentary art is art form that comes from the subjectivity of a maker, and that maker has freedom to express himself in his way or her way without thinking of the market. Then it comes actually being imposed that the market is going to dictate aesthetics.
Nils has a comment on it.
Because, I feel the market has kind of dictated form always, like if you wanted to be, if you really wanted to make a living out of documentary.
We just lost Nils. We will come back to him once he is back online. I wanted to add something that Daniel said before, because actually during IDFA, which is for the viewers that don't know IDFA, it's the biggest documentary film festival every year in November in Amsterdam. And I heard a discussion there on the relationship between cinemas and streaming platforms. And the interesting point was actually a platform called Pickle that kept in my mind. I don't know if our Dutch people know them better, but where you can actually go on the cinema's homepage and then decide on the cinema's homepage, if I understood it right, if you would buy the ticket for the cinema or for the online stream. And I thought that was very interesting development. And it seemed like the numbers from the cinema viewers didn't shrink. It rather supported the cinemas.
Yeah, you can choose which cinema you want to support, actually. By buying ticket on Pickle, you can click and choose which art house you want to support in the Netherlands.
I think that's really nice. But Daniel, you wanted to add something while we are trying to.
Is Nils back? No. I'm I was just going to go into the scenario that in the past the producers were very much restricted to usually their main broadcaster they worked with, and to have the scenario that everybody is willing to discuss a German project in a more general European or wider audience context. I think that mustn't always be good, but by and large, I think it's a good idea to wake up and say, like, let's try to make this project go further than just our local TV, and it's sometimes it belongs there, but many other times the aspirations maybe sometimes should be bigger. I know that Netflix at some point looked at projects that had a very local relevance. And then they were happy if it worked there and not so much worldwide. But then there's other projects that come from a particular region but have a worldwide reach, and that's how. So those are basically, as I understood it, the two main strategies there. And why not try to make a project in wherever and try to make a global reach? Yeah.
I mean, there are some examples where that worked, but if we talk about, I mean, we are here to talk about the future basically, and I know I chose a really big topic, but if we are looking on a sustainable documentary scene, if you would think what what is needed to change within the documentary scene, in particular in the European one, to create documentaries that reach their audiences, that don't die after the festival premiere, and also to support filmmakers. I mean, in the talks I personally had the last few weeks around that issue, there were some interesting aspects, also some very critical, like maybe there are just too many documentaries around. So I would love to hear your perspective on that, whoever feels like starting first. Jan.
I think if you're making a documentary film today, you have to maybe multiply your different formats. I mean, not like in the past, you make one film that's a feature-length documentary and that's it, and maybe a TV version. I think if you start a documentary, you should look at all the different media that exist today and maybe make one feature film, an hour film, half-an-hour series, online material. So it's really important to look at all these diverse possibilities. I think create sustainability in the documentary world means also diversify. And what I'm saying is make optimally use of what you have. You worked for 2 years making a film. Maybe the most profitable way of your film is a website in the end. You never know. Optimally use what you have. I think that's a really, really important notion. And I'm continuously saying also to all these training platforms to teach filmmakers this. And also I think, just one more line about this, I think that all these training platforms for documentary filmmakers should teach people how to put films online themselves. That they know that it's like what if you want to be a production manager, you have to have a driver's license. You want to be a documentary filmmaker, you have to be able to put your films online and do it yourself. I mean, that whole notion of self-distribution, being involved in distribution yourself, is becoming increasingly important.
Do you know an example where self-distribution really worked?
There is, I mean, there was a very large article on Peter Broderick's website 2 or 3 months ago about somebody who, it's an article that really goes into every single detail of self-distribution, which was very successful. So I think it's very important for filmmakers to learn, look at case stories, look at websites of people who do things like this, to learn how a certain level of self-distribution can be important for your career.
So we have now Nils back. Welcome back, Nils. We lost you in the middle of your sentence. So yes. We will go back there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the form, I totally agree that the form is kind of changing to all the distribution channels. But, there was the same case before. If you wanted to make a living out of documentaries, you had to adapt to certain formats in the TV market and co-production market, and that forces you to tell a story in a certain way. And I think that is the same if you want to land with a certain financier. It's the same for Netflix, obviously. And I think you, as Jan just said, you really, as a filmmaker in general, not just for documentaries, but you have to do your homework and have to know the market very well. And certain financing, certain money requires certain storytelling or certain form. And it's your decision if you want to go left or right. And I think you have to think about that quite intensely if you want to make a film, and for which platform are you doing this film, which audience do you want to reach. All these questions you have to answer yourself while you're starting the project, and that was needed before and is much more needed now. And I think I totally agree that especially for younger talent, you have to educate people in this sense and make them sensible for that, because the line between, or the line is blurring between a producer, director. I'm always speaking about filmmakers, and I think you have to at least have an overview and a certain knowledge of the market. That is definitely important.
I think, Daniel, did you want to add something on that? I did a movement.
No, I smiled because when we go, I don't know, sometimes we have projects from film school, and you kind of think they're going to rip me apart because they're so much ahead, and they're just streaming and they just watch everything online. But then they turn around with projects where you kind of think, really? I mean, so it's funny to see what will happen. But I think there is a tendency, and I think a lot of people do realize that they have a chance to have a much broader audience. And we also see that a lot of traditional TV companies, and particularly the public broadcasters, are trying to catch up in terms of a certain visual style and narrative style, and then I think so I think there is much more opportunity, even if I just had a little thinky that moment when you said, Nils, if you want to live off making documentary, because that has been a challenge, and that probably will be a challenge for some time.
I actually had the conversation with Rada that it also, living off documentaries is always, it is for many people in the business a challenge and will be a challenge. But we also had the conversation that it depends in which country in Europe you live, and that we can't talk about Europe as a whole because how much money you will get for funding or how the situation is will be rather different from where you come from. So I was wondering, Rada, because we talked a bit about this disbalance, if you would like to go deeper into this topic in particular.
Well, I can add to this that funds like IDFA Berta fund that exists, and before that, when it was called Jan Freiman fund, when it started, it was even more crucial at that point of history of Eastern Europe for so many filmmakers. And if we look how much this small subsidies, this small amount, changed the landscape in Eastern Europe of the documentary scene. If you think of the big directors and big producers like Georgi Paunov and Martička Božilova and others, they all actually started in that time with the small help of European very important funds. And somehow by becoming EU, Eastern Europe is still very much behind. I mean, including big countries and big cinema countries and big documentary cinema countries like Poland. And it's really different when you talk about, funds in the Netherlands or in Germany or in Denmark or in Bulgaria and Croatia and other countries, let alone parts of Eastern Europe that are not part of EU. And it's really, when I read the reports, of fundings, it's sometimes very ridiculous to see that somebody got for documentary production 5,300 euros support for the whole film. And so it's very much talking about, pears and apples, but it's something for another discussion maybe, and for a very broad discussion. I see that, some European, really European fund that would be independent, would really be needed, and that would consider not only money-wise relevance, but also, as you can see in Europe now, with different, especially in COVID time, governments, how they behave, and so on. And there are certain topics that are not able to discuss in certain countries being supported by local money. So I think Europe really has to understand that, and if COVID had learned us something, that's, I think, the necessity of bonding and more solidarity and more kind of interrelations that would be based on this understanding of each other.
So we are nearly at the end of our time. I'm just doing a bit of timekeeping, but I would like to add 2 questions at that point, and also mention that if anyone online has a question for our wonderful experts, please just comment I know that's spooky doing that publicly. But if we talk about this, what is the perspective of co-productions in the documentary scene, and how can this maybe also contribute in like solving this balance? And could co-productions in particular like play a more crucial role in the future of documentaries? And also one question that, like, it's 3 questions in a row, I know, but we had during the film festival a rather lively discussion on who should tell which stories, and if we, from a European perspective, should, as production companies, not rather work with local directors or people who make the films, than rather going there and showing everything from our perspectives. It's about who owns the story, and so I think that's like a nice rounding up the whole issues, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Anyone first?
I think that the strength of the festival circuit was it being, or having been, or a meeting place of producers. And I think that trying to find partners, trying to find friends, people that you like to work with in different, I think it's essential. I think it's essential to build the strength of your production company. If you look at the more successful French, English, German documentary producers, they all have partners everywhere. Work with Finland and with the Swedes, and the French work with the Germans. I think it's really, really, really important. And that is why it's a pity that those festivals are just on hold for the moment, because that is a very crucial role of these festivals. I mean, a festival, an event like Sunnyside, for instance, the main strength of Sunnyside is producers meeting producers, and it's very profitable. I mean, profitable in the sense it's a very good idea.
But do these co-productions then rather circle about Western European countries, working with Western European countries where the funds are sitting? No, we can't hear you, sorry. Yeah, now you're back, sorry.
Now, there's events like Medienboard, but there's a lot of producers from Northern Africa, from the Mediterranean countries, looking for partners, and people from West Germany, from Germany and from France, they go there and find partners. I mean, of course, because of the level of financing in Western Europe, and also the funding structures in Western Europe, there's more options and more possibilities. I mean, but I think there's a definite opening. I know a number of Dutch and French and Belgian producers who continuously work with Latin America, with African countries and Asian countries, even for small documentaries. You know, they create co-productions.
It's interesting.
Very important.
I think so too. So before we round this whole thing up, if you would wish for something for the future to strengthen the documentary scene, what would it be? What do you think would be needed most in order to create a really strong scene that supports on one hand filmmakers, but on the other hand builds a platform? I will start with Rada on that.
Well, I can just repeat what I said before, that I would wish for more interconnectivity and more, how to say, collaboration that comes out not only of the interest, but of this kind of curiosity about each other. I mean, if we think just about one film from last year, that's Honeyland from Macedonia, that was nominated for Oscar in 2 categories. It's just a small cinema country, extremely small documentary cinema country at the moment. I mean, in the history, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, they had great directors also, but now they have very few directors and even fewer number of producers that do documentaries. So I'm saying, you know, great examples, great talents. It just, I think this interconnectivity would help us all and would, you know, give these diamonds shine stronger.
Jan, would you like to continue going from there? Because for me, it's like
A year from now, we'll probably see a flood of COVID-related stories made on cell phones. Okay, I am not so sure if a lot of people want to see those films because COVID has been a very, very bad memory. I think that we really need uplifting, positive stories. The world is not in a great shape at the moment on all kind of levels. And we need films that give people hope, courage, ideas to get out of the shit. And I think that's for the next couple of years our task as documentary filmmakers. Think about those things. I think there's endless film festivals with films, lots of also very good films of people in misery that don't really give any answers. Anyway, that's my closing remark. I hope I want positive stories.
That's a very beautiful remark. I go to Daniel. Daniel? No, Daniel, you wanted to say something. No.
No, I just want to link up to that. It's funny because a lot of times at pitching forums we said, is this another film that's going to make me kill myself? So I'm totally with Jan that we need to be also looking for the positive story. I absolutely love Rada's idea of interconnecting more on a European level and also maybe rethinking European level funding. I know there is a lot of co-production going on, and even in Germany, all the bigger projects are all co-productions, international co-productions. So there is an active scene, but I like the idea. Maybe we should have some funding that in a couple of years on a European level that goes for either artistic excellence for the crazy stuff that goes to festivals and where we don't ask any questions who saw this, but did you see this? And then the other side maybe something that's more business minded, where we say, okay, this is a project that will make and needs to make a bigger audiences, so that we're separated a little bit. And I think I would love to see that because we do have a lot of projects that are somehow in the middle, and maybe it'll stay like that because it's very hard to make an excellent film. But give that incentive and then not ask where you come from, but show me your project. Yeah. And then I give the word to Nils, who's the future for all of this.
Well, I think, I first of all really agree with all you said, but from my perspective, it's really also concentrating on the craft of storytelling and really tell stories. And a lot of stories are, a lot of projects that are pitched to me or that I come across are very much subject driven and sujet driven, but a great sujet or a subject is not a great film. And I think a lot of people underestimate that, and storytelling is really, a complete arc of intention, obstacle, solution, and really concentrating on the protagonist. And this kind of journalistic approach worked very well in public TV, but I think there is a huge demand on authentic stories out there, and I think we should be more optimistic and more proud as well to tell real stories and that in a new and challenging and fascinating way. And I think there is, I can just say from my perspective as a commissioner that there is a huge demand for that, and people are watching that kind of content, and that is fantastic, I think. And we are reaching new audiences as well. A lot of younger people now are watching documentaries, and it's not just educational, be seen as educational, and I think that is great. And there I just want to address, really concentrate on what is the core essence of your story. Is there really a story, or do you just have a great subject that you want to talk about? And that's not really a documentary, that's an article.
I think that were 4 very beautiful last words that we can sum up at concentrate on storytelling, on how to get these amazing stories out and be positive, which I like, because as a festival, as a human rights film festival, I do know that feeling of, wow, too many documentaries where I really go out depressed afterwards, even if they are really important as well. But I think finding a middle ground there is really nice. And I also really like the idea of interconnectivity. And Daniel, you should absolutely proceed this idea of a fund. That would be so amazing. We will come back to you in like 3 to 4 years and ask you how that is going. That's nice. No, but really, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Thank you so much for talking to me today. And I hope we will see each other in one or the other format again and continue this very important discussion, because I think we as a business should also think a lot about what we want to do and where we will go in the future. So have a lovely evening. We will be back in half an hour with Vivian Schröder, who will moderate the panel on the role of documentaries for European societies, with experts on audio development of impact strategies. And we will see how we can actually reach the audience with the projects we are producing, and where we sometimes maybe need to think out of the box. So thank you and good night.